Money doesn't lie. People do. Witnesses lie. Alibis are fabricated. Stories get polished. And timelines are manipulated. But financial records have no memory. They don't negotiate. They don't even know someone is watching them. Every transaction has a timestamp, a location, and permanence. Every withdrawal, every transfer, every purchase. It all leaves a paper trail investigators get with a single warrant. And federal agents reportedly already have Annie Guthrie's records. The investigation into Nancy Guthrie added a forensic dimension that changes the entire analysis, because physical evidence reveals what happened. Communication records reveal exactly who knew. Financial records reveal the why. Let us first clarify what it means when FBI forensic accountants join a disappearance case, because it is not a routine step. Forensic accounting is expensive, specialized, and takes a massive amount of time. You don't use it on a hunch. It is deployed when the investigation already suggests money movements are relevant, when a preliminary review of accounts flags something requiring an in-depth analysis, when analysts believe the paper trail will reveal what interviews, security cameras, and phone records simply cannot. Bringing forensic accountants into Nancy Guthrie's case means investigators already suspected the financial picture was key, that they weren't shooting in the dark, that something in the initial financial analysis, a balance, a transfer, a pattern, had already caught their eye before specialists arrived. The question is what they discovered upon looking closer. This is what forensic accountants actually do when they join a case like this. Understanding their methodology explains why their findings are so crucial. They don't just look at a bank statement. They reconstruct a person's entire financial structure over a specific time frame, usually 6 to 12 months before the key event. They scrutinize every checking, savings, credit card, and investment account, digital payment platforms, and bank transfers. That is how they map out income and expenses, hunting for any anomaly, deviations from what their income would justify, shifts in their habitual spending patterns, irregularities, sudden large withdrawals, suspicious transfers, and spending in categories that don't match their recorded lifestyle. Black holes where money vanished without a trace in any identifiable transaction. Cases are built on those deviations, because every single deviation represents a decision. Someone chose to move funds in a certain way at a certain time for a reason. Under the lens of a disappearance, understanding those choices can reveal pressures, motives, and relationship dynamics that no other evidence brings to light. They say they found deviations in Annie Guthrie's records. The first major thread of financial analysis points to what investigators described as signs of economic suffocation in the lead-up to Nancy's disappearance. Plummeting balances, a relentless flow of expenses against rapidly draining funds, coupled with credit card debt that betrays an escalating pressure. A pattern that, viewed chronologically, shows someone under suffocating financial stress before that pivotal day. Financial stress and isolation don't incriminate anyone. People have money issues all the time. What's crucial here is the point where everything intersects, the collision between that period of financial suffocation and the days they suspect Nancy disappeared. With mounting debts and rising suspicions, investigators are asking highly specific questions. Did that economic pressure play a role in what ultimately happened? Did it create a motive that investigators had missed before? And most critically, was there someone in that financial circle who was either the source of pressure or its solution? Those answers would have guided agents toward the financial ties within the family itself. And this is where the case grows far more complex. One of the heaviest analytical elements in these records, according to reports, is the pattern of family transfers. Money shifting from account to account within their inner circle, financial aid sent back and forth, reimbursements, and payment logs, revealing a web of complete mutual dependence. Investigators examined all of it. Not because financial support between relatives is suspicious in itself. Families help each other with money constantly, but because, viewed through the lens of a mysterious disappearance, the structure of those financial ties can expose dynamics, nothing else will. Who was relying on whom? Who held the financial upper hand? Who stood to gain or lose the most from a sudden shift in the family economy? Who dragged around debts that depended entirely on the constant support of others? And what happened to that lifeline if the relationship holding it up shattered? These questions map the family's financial blueprint. And that layout allegedly hid something investigators chose to dissect under a microscope. Let us examine family financial dependence through the sharp lens of a criminal investigation, because this is a dimension of these cases that often gets overlooked in public discussion. If one family member depends financially on another, Their ability to sustain their lifestyle, meet their obligations, or clear their debts rests entirely on money supplied by someone else. That dependency builds a power dynamic. The subservient partner has every interest in preserving that bond. They must secure the goodwill and ongoing generosity of the person funding their life. And sometimes, they have to ensure that support flows, even when the personal relationship is completely falling apart. But financial dependence also works in reverse. It can feed a toxic resentment and breed immense pressure. It twists the family bond into a suffocating cage of debt, eroding whatever real affection was left. Reports show investigators wanted to map out precisely who was bankrolling whom within the inner circle of the Guthrie family. And if those financial deals played a role in Nancy's dark fate, apparently, the answer is so tangled that forensic accountants are still dissecting every transaction to this day. Now, let us examine the critical element that makes this financial analysis so vital to the case: the timestamp. Every financial transaction leaves an exact mark the second a card is swiped, a wire is sent, or cash is pulled from an ATM. These records are incredibly precise and are stored independently by the bank, the payment processor, and the merchant's checkout system. They are absolutely impossible to alter after the fact. FBI analysts compared Annie's transaction history directly with other forensic timelines already established in the case, including cell phone activity, GPS location data, communication logs, and digital evidence to piece together Tommaso Cian's moves. This is where forensic accounting displays its real power, not in isolation, but by cross-referencing the data. When a banking transaction aligns with a sudden silence on a cell phone, detectives get a clue. When a cash withdrawal at an ATM matches a GPS tracking pattern, the real story begins to take shape. And if spending in a specific category spikes right before or after a critical moment, investigators pay close attention. Reports suggest the timestamps on Annie's transactions lined up neatly with other vital forensic evidence. Money was moving while other things went down. And in a criminal inquiry, these chronological overlaps are never written off as mere coincidence without proof. Her erratic spending habits demand a close look, even if the details that spooked police remain locked away. Still, the specific areas that usually trigger alarms in financial investigations are very well defined. Bizarre purchases in categories that make zero sense based on past spending habits, massive spending sprees over short windows, or unexplained cash withdrawals that leave the banking system and immediately become impossible to trace, and money transfers to unknown accounts that do not match any regular service or known relationship of the holder. Each of these red flags points to a different dark suspicion. Sudden, unexpected purchases suggest someone was setting up a plan. Rapid spending screams urgency or panic, and pulling cash reveals a deliberate choice to operate completely off the grid. A choice that, in the eyes of investigators, strongly suggests the person behind the withdrawal either wanted to leave no footprints or had to settle a debt requiring untraceable funds. Detectives spotted all these red flags in Annie's accounts. Which of these categories weighed heaviest, and which anomaly ties directly to the timeline of the crime, is what forensic analysts are still parsing today. There is another angle to forensic accounting that almost no one outside law enforcement ever considers. Reconstructing spending habits before and after a crime does more than just reveal a motive. It reveals behavior. Spending patterns expose a person's emotional state. For someone planning a crime, premeditated purchases leave a very specific behavioral signature. This means buying equipment, materials, or services that make no sense within their documented lifestyle. Transactions that in hindsight look like preparation, alongside spending beyond their means, suggesting they drained resources to fund something highly specific. Someone reacting after the fact shows a completely different pattern. This usually triggers erratic purchases and spending in highly unusual categories, transactions suggesting an attempt to manage, resolve, or fix something after a critical event. And someone under constant financial pressure reveals another signature: dwindling bank accounts and maxed out credit cards. Along with transactions typical of someone trying to maintain a lifestyle their income can no longer support. Investigators reportedly detected all three of these patterns in Annie Guthrie's financial history during the time Nancy disappeared. This includes the before, the after, and the constant pressure underlying both moments. This three-dimensional portrait of preparation and reaction, combined with constant tension, amounts to a behavioral financial confession. It charts a person's emotional state during this critical window, revealing to investigators Annie's direct connection to her mother's disappearance. Let's add Tommaso Cian to this analysis, as his footprint does not fade from this web. Investigators reportedly analyzed the financial links between Tommaso and the Guthrie family estate. That analysis was specifically designed to understand whether his financial relationship with them created dynamics relevant to the case, or if the flow of cash between them created some form of dependency, debt, or blackmail. In cases where police already have a solid digital footprint on a suspect, as they do with Tommaso, financial analysis serves to verify the hard facts. If his GPS matches ATM withdrawals from accounts tied to the case, there's a connection. If his phone silence lines up with suspicious money movements, that's another red flag. If there were bank transfers between his accounts and the family's on key dates, police will want answers. This audit widened the investigators' scope on Tommaso, adding an economic angle to an already detailed digital profile. There is a detail about forensic accounting in federal cases that everyday people often misunderstand, and it is crucial to understanding how the police are using this evidence. The goal is not to find one smoking gun purchase, a single withdrawal, or an incriminating buy. Real financial analysis tracks patterns, defining a person's baseline economic routine over the long term, to pinpoint exactly where that pattern broke. That anomaly is the proof, not a single, isolated transaction, but rather the behavior of a financial life operating completely differently during a specific window than it ever did before or after. And that profile, rebuilt after months of reviewing bank statements and transfer histories, is what forensic accountants construct. It is painstaking work. It requires cross-referencing data from multiple banks, different accounts, and various payment platforms. But once it's done, it delivers something incredibly hard for the defense to dismantle. Built not on an isolated, ambiguous fact, but the weight of an entire financial history. The police believe that Annie's complete financial history, once fully pieced together, will provide crucial evidence for the case against her. Following the money is classic criminology. But it is worth exploring why it is so revealing in family crime. In crimes committed by strangers, forensic accounting is rarely used as a primary tool. Between strangers, there is usually no financial connection, offering zero value to the analysis. The paper trail gains real power when a financial bond exists between suspect and victim, and especially if money was flowing between them. This happens when someone has a financial interest in another person's assets, or when their economic relationship creates tensions or incentives that directly drive the crime. The Guthrie family was trapped in a financial maze, defined by constant money transfers and highly specific economic support. Financial obligations and dependency dictated the rhythm of this family's life. Nancy's sudden disappearance and the resulting financial shifts would not go unnoticed by those tied to her money. Investigators scrutinized exactly what those financial shifts would look like, who stood to gain from restructuring the family's financial setup, who was freed from a financial burden by wiping someone off the map, and who was left exposed to new debts. This kind of analysis is deeply uncomfortable. It forces us to view family ties as mere business transactions, which, despite love and duty, they often are. But police say this audit reveals a criminal motive that interrogations and phone tracking could never uncover. Cash withdrawals require very close attention, because they are the exact transactions that worry detectives most in missing person cases. Physical currency is the exact point where the banking system loses the trail of human behavior. A card payment is easily tracked to a store, a location, an exact time, and a specific amount. Bank transfers are traced from sender to receiver. But cash, once pulled from an ATM, vanishes from the paper trail. What it buys, whose hands it lands in, or what debt it settles, none of that is recorded. When detectives suspect a prior conspiracy and secret communications, of planning or a post-crime cover-up, unexplained cash withdrawals are the biggest financial red flag. They show someone was making transactions they wanted hidden. It could be off-the-books money, perhaps to pay for goods, services, or to buy silence, completely bypassing any search warrant the police might obtain. Reports emerged that investigators detected suspicious withdrawals from Annie's accounts. The amounts, the dates, and the lack of trace expenditures to justify where the cash went caught the forensic accountant's attention. Where that money ended up after leaving the bank is a mystery police are desperate to solve. One angle in this forensic audit connects directly to that first phone call and the Walmart purchase. This paints a very clear pattern of behavior both before and after the incident occurred. Personal protective equipment purchased just days before Nancy vanished. Financial tension mounting during the months leading up to the event. Bizarre spending habits and suspicious cash movements at critical moments. And then, right after, a call to an associate with a criminal record. Forensic accountants are looking at him not just for phone logs, but as a potential financial link to the crime. Did money change hands between Annie Guthrie and that first contact she called? Were there actual transactions between them, like payments, transfers, or handovers of cash on the books? Are detectives studying their financial ties alongside the call logs? There are no public answers to these questions yet, but forensic teams auditing Annie's accounts are standardly tracing every transaction with her known contacts, including every recipient of her payments, every destination account, and anyone involved in her cash flows. If the recipient of that first call shows up as receiving payments or transfers, as someone who got funds directly from Annie, this crossover of phone logs and financial forensics builds a far more damning case than any isolated clue. This is the core principle of the financial theory. Once physical evidence and phone records build strong suspicion, as seems to be the case here, following the garden discoveries, DNA, and the digital reconstruction of Tommaso's trail, forensic accounting plays a critical role in court. It proves motive. And while motive is not required in a criminal trial, it makes the case make sense to a jury. Physical evidence proves what happened. Communications prove who knew and when. The financial trail answers the question that jurors always ask. Why? Why would anyone do something like this? What was the pressure that made this seem like a viable option? What was the financial reality in her life that drove the decision, the cover-up, or how she handled what happened next? Prosecutors building a case for a jury need that answer to be concrete. Abstract motives, jealousy, anger, fear, all of that is hard for a jury to process. A documented, dated financial motive stamped by a bank is something jurors can easily see, examine, and understand. Word is, investigators believe Annie Guthrie's financial history holds the concrete motive linking the rest of the evidence together. Let's be clear about how the entire investigation looks now, because the situation has shifted drastically since this case began. First, a discovery in the backyard. Forensics excavated Annie Guthrie's property and recovered what appear to be human remains. DNA analysis is currently underway. The evidence was preserved under judicial standards, signaling that the prosecution plans to bring this to court very soon. There is also a digital forensic trail on Tommaso Cian. His communication logs, GPS movements, and deleted data have been almost completely reconstructed. Movement patterns during suspicious gaps in digital silence match the property timeline. There is a forensic thread of communication. Annie Guthrie's first call after the incident to a close family associate with a criminal record is a key focus here. The exact timing, duration, and context of that phone call have been analyzed with extreme scrutiny. The recipient is believed to hold crucial information. Plus, there is a witness from Walmart. A former employee claims to remember Annie buying emergency and survival gear days before Nancy vanished. The transaction records have already been examined. And now, enter financial forensics. FBI analysts and forensic accountants reviewed Annie's entire history, identifying clear signs of a financial crisis, unusual spending patterns, suspicious cash withdrawals, family transfers, and transaction dates that align perfectly with other forensic timelines. 5 independent threads: physical evidence, digital evidence, communications, witnesses, and financial records, all converging on the same time frame, the same suspects, and the same questions about what happened to Nancy Guthrie. The significance of 5 converging threads in a federal investigation is simply massive. Defense attorneys can challenge a single forensic thread, finding an expert to question an interpretation, method, or specific conclusion. But disputing 5 independent threads at once, threads built on completely different methods by separate investigative units, requires every single challenge to succeed on its own. The likelihood of tearing down all 5 threads crumbles instantly. Federal prosecutors nearing an indictment with 5 solid forensic threads are no longer searching for more proof. They are mapping out their presentation, evaluating how each thread reinforces the others. They shape the narrative so the jury follows the logic from financial strain to behavior, moving through phone records and physical evidence, straight to an inevitable conclusion. In that structure, financial records are the bedrock. They explain the why. The rest explains the how, when, and who. A final thought on what this financial analysis means for Annie Guthrie. Throughout this entire investigation, Annie's public stance has been highly ambiguous. The property where the remains were found links back to her. She made that first call after the incident. The suspicious financial accounts belonged to her, and that Walmart purchase, if confirmed, was made by her. Separately, each of these threads has an innocent explanation. A property can be used without the owner knowing. Initial phone calls can reflect trust, not guilt. Financial hardship is a universal struggle. Routine purchases are normal, but when 4 separate threads point to the exact same person at the same time, inside a federal case where human remains were already found on her land, the weight of that coincidence is devastating. Financial accounts do not settle the case on their own, but they bring a vital element investigators felt was missing from earlier forensic records: the documented paper trail of the pressures, debts, and money dynamics hitting the Guthrie family months before Nancy vanished. And sometimes, understanding the pressure is the key to cracking the whole case. Money always confesses the truth, even when people lie. It logs what you needed, what you feared, what you paid for, and what you desperately hid. Annie Guthrie's financial history is now an open book for federal forensic accountants. What it reveals is written in stone forever.